Part 7. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 61. Chapter 61 Getting the Antidote. Sue Wainer was enjoying her lunch, but her face twitched from time to time, and her chewing movements were a little difficult. The eldest lady. The voice came, and Sue Wainer's face instantly became ferocious. A hint of blood smelled in her mouth. She covered her mouth and looked at Sui-Huan, who rushed in gloomily. Humbled, you'd better really have something important to say. Miss. Sui-Huan was very frightened, but she didn't care about it. She hurriedly leaned into Sue Wainer's ear and whispered. This idiot. Sue Wainer slammed the table hard, frightening the maids around her to kneel down. She took a few breaths and her chest heaved. Go get her medicine and tell her that if Suleun finds out, either she will die or her family will die. Yes, miss. Sui-Huan quickly took the antidote and left the yard without daring to stay. Hong Yi was waiting anxiously in the corner. Hearing footsteps, he quickly looked over. The person who came was none other than Sui-Huan. The eldest lady sees that you are doing well and is willing to give you the antidote, but remember, if something happens, think more about your family. Sui-Huan left a message and left. Hong Yi held the antidote in his hand and felt a chill. If the eldest lady knew that she had betrayed her, what would happen to her family? She stood there and did not move for a moment. In the darkness, Qiuliu stared at the red leaves, her eyes gradually darkening. After a while, there was movement in the red leaves. She put the antidote into her chest, turned around and walked towards Huaziazu. Qiuliu didn't dare to relax her gaze on Hong Yi. Once she tried to do something detrimental to Suleun, Qiuliu would take action. Fortunately, until Hong Yi entered Huaziazu, there was nothing unusual. Suleun also happened to have lunch, and when he looked up, he saw Hong Yi standing by the door. What are you doing standing outside? Come in. Hong Yi swallowed her saliva and stepped into the house. She reached out and took out the antidote from her arms, holding it in both hands and handing it over. Miss, this is the antidote that I got from the eldest lady. I was almost discovered when I went to Sui-Huan's house, so I made this move. You are not stupid. But you have to do a full show. You put this cream on your hands, so that if someone comes to test you, you can handle it. Suleun glanced at Hong Yi. It was already good to be able to react in that situation. It's a pity that I chose the wrong path at the beginning. It's miss, I know what I have done has long been a big mistake. I just ask for your mercy and must rescue my family. Hong Yi bent down deeply, with tears in his eyes. Lian Xian stepped forward and took the antidote from Hong Yi's hand, and then applied the cream on Hong Yi's hand. She felt a little emotional. If she had known this, why would she have done it in the first place? But Lian Xian knew that Hong Yi had brought it upon herself. If the lady hadn't smelled the cream was poisonous, her face would have been rotten by now. The pity in Lian Xian's heart faded a bit, and she handed the antidote to Suleun. Suleun smelled the medicinal powder carefully, thoughts swirling in his mind. Soon I jotted down a few medicinal materials. She divided the antidote into two and gave half of it to Hong Yi. This amount may not be enough, but I have to test it a few times before I can confirm what medicinal materials are in it, so I need to leave half of it. But don't worry, wait. I will make the antidote and give it to you. As for your family, since I have said it, I will do it naturally, and all you have to do is don't expose it in front of Sue Wainer. Thank you, miss. Hong Yi kowtowed several times before standing up and leaving with red eyes. After Hong Yi left, Qiuliu entered the house. What happened? Going from Huaziazu to the peony garden only took a cup of tea at most, and he didn't come back until Suleun finished his lunch of red leaves. Something must have happened in the meantime. Qiuliu told everything about what he saw in the peony garden. Suleun nodded slowly. I'm not surprised that Sue Wainer can say such a thing. The most important thing now is to find Hong Ye's family first. Lian Xian, go and invite your brother. Yes, miss. Unexpectedly, Lian Xian ran into Suya as soon as she left Keahuaziazu. Young master. Lian Xian, why didn't you take care of Yuner in the house? How is Yuner doing now? Suya heard someone say about Suleun's allergy. He just came back from the school training ground and hurried over. Young master, Miss is fine. Lian Xian saluted Suya, you came at the right time. Miss asked me to invite you. Please me. Suya frowned, thinking it was something big, and quickly entered Keahuaziazu. Lian Xian followed. Yuner. Suya stepped into the house and saw the red rash on Suleun's face at a glance, and his expression changed immediately. He hurriedly stepped forward and took a good look at it. Yuner, does it hurt? How come you are so allergic? Brother, don't worry, this is not an allergy, it's poisoning. Poisoned. Suya's eyes widened and his expression became serious. Who poisoned you? Who else do you think is in this house? Suleun did not answer, but asked back. Suya frowned and muttered, Suho and the old lady have the best reputation. It is impossible for them to do such a thing, is it Suwainer? Her brother is not stupid, but he was also deceived by Suwainer's face in his previous life. After all, they are sisters in name only after living together for 15 years. She's so brave, I'm going to settle the score with her right now. Ever since the last time he sent flowers, Suya understood that he was being used by Suwainer, so he ignored Suwainer's several overtures to him. I didn't expect Suwainer to be so cruel and poisoned Yuner. Brother, don't worry. There is no need for you, a man, to intervene in the affairs between our daughter's family. I will handle this matter. Since she wants to see my jokes, how can I not repay her well? Suleun grabbed Suya and shook his head at him. Suya was still angry, with a livid face, but he was no longer angry with Suwaner, but with himself. He can't even protect his own sister, how can he be such a brother? Brother, if you still look like this when you see Suwaner, I won't tell you anything in the future. Suleun sighed helplessly. She said this because she hoped to take the opportunity to make her brother understand some truth. His straightforward temperament is not a bad thing. Even his grandfather and the king of Jin admired his brother's straightforward temperament. How can you survive if you are born into a noble family and don't have any scheming? Suho was so ambitious that he was waiting for her and her brother to make mistakes so that his children from outside the family could take over. If her brother is still like this, even if she can survive for a while, how can she survive for the rest of her life? Suya couldn't help but be stunned when he met Suleun's heavy gaze, feeling a little ashamed. He, the elder brother, actually has his sister to worry about. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 62. Chapter 62, Making the Antidote. Suya sat obediently and listened to Suleun's teachings. Looking at his brother's serious look, Suleun pursed his lips and smiled and did not continue. Brother, actually I came to see you today because I have something to trouble you with. Upon hearing this, Suya's eyes lit up. What's the matter? After briefly explaining Hong Yi's situation to Suya, Suleun looked at Suya's increasingly ugly expression and wondered whether he had given his brother too much stimulation today. Elder brother. Don't worry, sister, I will definitely handle this for you. Suya put away the expression on his face, stood up and left Keahuaziazu without stopping. He made a mistake the last time he approached Wenpo. This time he couldn't let his sister down no matter what. Such a turmoil shocked King Guo. Young master, wait a minute, someone from Prince Jin has asked you to come over if he has something to do. King Guo shouted while running, and finally stopped Suya. You went back to King Jin and said that I was in a hurry. Hey, master, King Jin also said it's an urgent matter. Upon hearing this, Suye could only take out a token from his arms and hand it to King Guo. Go to Yu Tower and find 2 people. Hurriedly telling King Guo, Suye turned around and went to the stables. After a while, a horse ran out from the side door of Su mansion. Hunting all the way to Prince Jin's mansion, Suye got off his horse, handed the rope to the boy, and quickly entered the prince's mansion. Study. Xiao Shenjiao slowly started writing, and a man wearing dark blue clothes beside him exclaimed, "I haven't seen you for a few days, and your highness's writing skills have become more and more refined. It is an honor for me to be praised by Mr. Gu." The two were joking, and it was obvious that they had a very good relationship. As soon as Suye opened the door, he saw the man standing next to Xiao Shenjiao. He was startled at first, then stepped forward and slapped the man the back. "Okay, Gu Yuanbei, you didn't even say a word to me when you came back. Brother Su, don't be angry, didn't I ask His Highness to send someone to find you?" As soon as these words came out, Suye's expression changed. "So it's you who is talking about the urgent matter?" The voice was rather gritty. Gu Yuanbei looked at Xiao Shenjiao suspiciously. "Does he want to hit me?" "I think this is indeed the case," Xiao Shenjiao echoed. Suye snapped his fingers, but didn't actually take action. "Since it's not an urgent matter, I'll go back first." "Brother Su, why are you leaving so soon? I'm back, won't you help me wash away the dust?" "What's your emergency?" Seeing Suye's strange reaction, Xiao Shenjiao couldn't help but ask. Since it is a private matter of the Su family, it is naturally difficult for Suye to tell it. What's more, he always feels that if he tells it, something bad will happen. "It's not a particularly urgent matter." "That's all right, let's go, Brother Su, I'll invite you and your highness to go to Jade Tower for something to eat." Gu Yuanbei put his hand on Suye's shoulder and pulled him out. The original demeanor of a scholar had long since disappeared. Xiao Shenjiao was a step behind. "Lu Feng, go find out." A figure left quietly. At night, Xiao Shenjiao returned to the palace smelling of alcohol. Lai Yufeng came out of the corner and knelt down on one knee. "Your Majesty, my subordinates found out that young Master Su sent his servant to Yuelo with the token to find 2 people. Looking for someone again." Xiao Shenjiao laughed, and almost without hesitation, he thought of Suleun. "I'm afraid this matter has something to do with her. Ask the people from Yuelo to send a few more people to look for him, and remember to protect them after they are found." "Yes." Lu Feng's figure quickly disappeared again. Under the moonlight, Xiao Shenjiao walked towards the study room with steady steps. As soon as the candle was lit, a black shadow flashed out. He had a mask on his face and his voice was hoarse. "I already have a clue about what you asked me to check earlier. I need to go to southern Xinjiang. Do you need me to send someone?" "No need, you should pay more attention in the capital. I'm afraid those people like King Yu are about to take action." The candle light flickered and the person was gone. Xiao Shenjiao sat at the table, his cold eyebrows even more sharp under the candle light. "Miss, are you really the one who smelled these herbs?" Lian Xian held a list with no less than 10 kinds of medicinal materials written on it, and Suleun smelled these by just smelling the antidote. Suleun put down the pen and handed over another piece of paper. "This is the recipe for the poison. You can buy it too." Holding 2 lists of medicinal materials, Lian Xian couldn't help but marvel. In her previous life, when she was still young, Suleun knew that her sense of smell was different from ordinary people. However, at that time in the Li family, she was accompanied by farm work all day long, so even if she had a good sense of smell, it would be of little use. It was Master Wang Chen of Longjio Temple who discovered her talent and taught her medical skills. "My sense of smell is different from ordinary people, and I can distinguish the taste of different things. However, you need to rejudge the medicinal materials above after you buy them. Some of them may not be used. My slave, go and buy it immediately." Although Lian Xian was still surprised, she didn't think Sulayun was talking big words. She felt that no matter what her young lady did, it seemed possible. What's more, the young lady also directly smelled that the cream was poisoned. The medicinal materials were quickly bought back, and Sulayun and Lian Xian cooperated to make poisons and antidotes. This busy work lasts a whole day. The sky was getting darker and darker. Sulayun rubbed his sore shoulders and looked at Lian Xian. The latter's eyes were a little red. Let's get here today, Lian Xian, you can go back and rest, just let Hongye take care of you tonight. The slave went down first. Lian wanted to say something in her heart, but when she met Sulayun's eyes, she swallowed it back. She knew that since her young lady had said it, she would not change it at will. Hongye learned that Sulayun asked her to serve in the house, and felt that she had heard wrong. Sulayun has already clarified the previous theft for Hongye. Hongye accidentally took it away when he went into the house to clean. Hongye was fined slightly for this, and his monthly salary was deducted for 3 months as punishment. Although she came back with the antidote for Sulayun, she didn't think there was a chance that she would be reused. She was afraid that Sulayun would sell her out when the matter was over. She never thought that Sulayun would allow her to enter the house to serve him. Entering Sulayun's boudoir, Hongye stood in the corner, not daring to move, and even his eyes fell on his feet. Hongye, how many years have you been in Su Mansion? Sulayun was sitting in front of the dressing mirror. The red rash on his face in the mirror was terrifying. Sulayun even smashed a mirror when he saw her in his previous life, but he will not do so in this life. Even, she looked at her face with some interest. I have to say that Sulayun, who inherits Sun Gro's appearance, is beautiful. Even a rash can't cover up this kind of beauty. No wonder Su Wainer will destroy her face even until she dies. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 63. Chapter 63 Found Someone. Hongye lowered her head and said timidly, Miss Hui, it has been 10 years since I entered the house. 10 years is a long time. Sulayun stood up slowly. Hongye didn't dare to neglect. When he heard the movement, he immediately rushed forward and helped Sulayun to the bed. Hand out his hand to take off the coat she was wearing. The hand that had been smeared with the antidote had healed a lot, and most of the rash had disappeared. Miss, please go turn off the lights. The candles were blown out and the room became dark. Sulayun was lying on the bed, but his mind was thinking about the antidote prepared today. Suddenly, a thought crossed her mind, and she couldn't help but lie down halfway. Red leaves, light a lamp. Sulayun put on his coat by himself, and just as Hongye was getting the lamp, he saw her hurriedly out the door. Hongye followed quickly and entered the side cabin. It's a little messy inside, and you can smell a smell of medicinal herbs. She placed the lamp next to Sulayun and saw Sulayun lowering his head and writing something on the rice paper. Can you grind it? Sulayun pushed a medicine grinder over, took several medicinal materials with his other hand, and placed them beside him. Ded by. Grind all these into powder. Hongye responded and started pushing the medicine roller. This busyness did not finally end until the sound of the gong sounded at the 5th watch. Hongye suddenly woke up from her dream, met Sulayun's eyes, and knelt down in panic. This slave is asleep, please punish me. Go back and rest, Sulayun said, passing a packet of things in front of Hongye. The antidote here is enough for you to remove the poison from your hands. Hongye was still in a daze until she returned to her room. She looked at the antidote on the table and then at her hands. This is the antidote that the lady spent all night making? Can it really be effective? Hongye didn't dare to try it. She looked at her hand. If you didn't look carefully, it wouldn't be obvious. She put away the antidote given by Sulayun and applied some ointment on her hands. While having breakfast, Sulayun couldn't help but yawned a few times, and his eyes were filled with red bloodshot eyes. "Miss, you didn't sleep well last night." Mother Jang looked at Sulayun's appearance, her eyes filled with distress. Her young lady has such a nice face, but she must be sad if she looks like this. "Miss, I will ask the doctor to take a look at you now. Your face will definitely be fine." "Mammy." Sulayun called the person to stop. "I'm fine. It's not about my face. Don't worry about me." Hearing these words in Grandma Zhang's ears, she felt that her young lady was well behaved and sensible. It's all the old slave's fault for not taking good care of the young lady. Mammy Zhang wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. She didn't know how many crimes her family had suffered since the beating came back. She was also very ashamed of her and her wife. Sulayun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She really didn't care about her face, but she still comforted Granny Zhang for a few words. After Nanny Zhang went out, Lian Xian said, "Miss, are you making an antidote?" Sulayun nodded. "I had some ideas last night, and I was asked to tinker with them." "Miss, has the antidote been made?" Lian Xian was surprised. They had been busy all day yesterday but could not make it. Unexpectedly, the lady succeeded in one night. "Well, I had an idea when I went to bed, so I got up and gave it a try." When Sulayun said this, there was not much expression on his face, but Lian Xian couldn't help but take a breath. Given that there are so many kinds of medicinal materials and they are balanced according to different proportions, there are many possibilities, but the young lady actually spent only a day and a night on making them. "Miss, have you used it?" Lian Xian suddenly thought. "Why don't you let me try it first?" She was worried that there was something wrong with the antidote, and it would not be good if the young lady's face became more serious. Sulayun rubbed his eyes and said, "It's still in the side room. I'm not in a hurry to use it. You can just take a look and there's no need to try it." After all, she wanted to use this rash to miss the day to congratulate Mrs. Li on her birthday. "Miss, please rest first while I go take a look." Lian Xian left the house, closed the door, and walked to the side room. The antidote prepared by Sulayun is sitting on the table in the room. Although Sulayun didn't let her try it, for the safety of the young lady, Lian Xian still applied the poisoned cream to her hands. The poison took effect quickly, and a red rash appeared on the back of her hands. Lian Xian took the antidote, hesitated for a moment, and then applied it on the back of her hand. A shocking scene happened. Even faster than the onset of toxicity, the red rash on the back of my hand had faded away. This medicine is actually more effective than the antidote Su Weiner got from her. Lian Xian looked at the back of her hand with only a little red mark left, and admired Sulayun even more. At noon, Suye hurried into Kaahwaziazu with the envelope in his hand. "Yunur, we've found him." Sulayun was sitting at the desk reading books. When he heard Suye's words, he looked over. Suye opened the letter and there was a line of address written on the paper. "It is the place where Hong Yi's family was resettled. Quiliu, bring the red leaves, let's go." Since they found the person, Sulayun did not hesitate. The group left Su Mansion and went to the address on the letter. When they arrived, Sulayun realized that it was an alley not too far from Chang'an Street. Hong Ye followed behind, looking very anxious. The wooden door was closed, and Quiliu stepped forward and knocked. Soon, a clear male voice sounded, "Who is it?" "Xiao, it's my sister." As soon as he heard this voice, Hong Yi hurried back. The boy inside was also extremely anxious. He opened the door and threw himself into Hong Yi's arms. "Sister, Xiao misses you so much. Where's Grandma?" Hong Yi looked at Xiao. Although he had lost a lot of weight, at least he was not injured. Xiao pointed in, "Grandma is resting after eating." "Sister, Did you find someone to rescue us? No. Hongye shook her head, feeling a little guilty. If it weren't for her, Xiao and Grandma wouldn't have been caught by Su Weiner's people and used as chips to threaten her. She turned her head and looked at Su Leun. Xiao, this is Miss Su. She saved you and Grandma. Ms. Su, thank you for saving us. Xiao looked at the veiled Su Leun and showed a grateful smile. Su Leun touched his head. When she came over, she already knew from Su Ye's mouth that Su Weiner's men imprisoned people in a villa and had to work every day. Sometimes they didn't even get one meal a day. After entering the house, Xiao brought warm water to several people. Although the house is a bit old, the items are complete and new, but it does not look like the handiwork of my brother. Thinking again of the letter Su Ye brought, Su Leun frowned slightly. If she remembered correctly, there seemed to be a strange pattern on it. It seems like I have seen it somewhere before. Miss Hongye, can I ask you one more thing? Hongye's words interrupted Su Leun's thoughts. She looked at the red leaves kneeling on the ground and said, Brother will send someone to protect the safety of your family. After this incident, I will give you a sum of money and you can just leave the capital. Thank you, miss, thank you, master. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 64. Chapter 64 Weird Prescription. Although Hongye is helping Su Leun now, after all, Su Leun would never dare to use her again because of his criminal record. Su Leun and his party didn't stay too long. After Hongye finished reminiscing with her family, they got up and left. Just as he exited the alley, a voice came from behind him. Miss, please wait. This female voice sounded familiar. Su Leun turned around and saw a woman in grey cloth with her hair in a woman's bun chasing after her. It's you. It's really you, that's great. The woman dressed as a woman in front of her was clearly the wife of the man Su Leun saved last time at the Jade Building. I felt your back was familiar just now. You saved my husband in the Jade Tower last time, and you left before I could thank you. I have been looking for you these days, and I didn't expect to meet you today. As he spoke, the woman reached out to pull Su Leun's sleeves, but was stopped by Su Ye on the side. What are you up to? Looking at his brother's solemn expression, Su Leun patted his arm and said, Brother, it's okay. She looked at the woman and said, Last time it was just a simple matter, so you don't have to take it to heart. How can this be done? I hit you last time. No matter what, you have to give us a chance to apologize. My home is not far over there. Looking at where the woman was pointing, it was only a few steps away. Su Leun nodded, In that case, we won't bother you. Don't bother, don't bother. The woman led Su Leun and others to her home. Su Leun's eyes narrowed slightly. If an ordinary person saw his brother's expression, he would be so frightened that he could not speak. However, this woman did not show any fear. Is she really arrogant or something else? Enter the yard, everything is arranged very neatly. It is obvious that the owner of this yard is very particular about it. Young lady, I don't know what to call you yet. My name is Qinqiu, and my husband's surname is Zhou. He teaches in the academy and should be back soon. Qinqiu was very strong. As he spoke, he lifted the table against the wall. After a while, tables and chairs were placed in the yard. My surname is Su, and this is my brother. Su Leun didn't say his name, and Qinqiu didn't seem to care. You guys sit down quickly and I'll get you some tea. Looking at Qinqiu's busy figure, Su Leun glanced at Quiliu, who nodded and left the yard. When the hot tea was served, Qinqiu wiped her hands with some embarrassment. Miss Su, please don't dislike it. Mrs. Zhou is too polite. Su Leun took a sip, and there was a strong bitterness in her mouth, but her expression did not change much. He also smiled at Qinqiu. Qinqiu pulled up a chair and sat down next to Su Leun. Miss Su, You walked faster last time. The doctor came later and said that if you hadn't performed the acupuncture, my husband would have died a long time ago. I actually did it last time. You said you don't understand, but it turns out I don't understand. It almost hurt my husband, so thank you so much. Mrs. Joe really doesn't need to be so polite. Anyone with medical skills would help. I just did what I could. Suleun smiled gently and did not take credit for it. She only saved people because of her kindness as a doctor, and she didn't think about anything else. Qingqiu is a person who can't hold back her words and doesn't seem to have much money. Suleun easily figured out some of her situations. Qingqiu and her husband came to the capital half a year ago to prepare for next year's spring festival. Originally, her husband had already won the imperial examination 3 years ago, but because of his mother's death, he had to observe mourning for 3 years before missing out. After saying this, Kuai quietly entered the yard and nodded to Suleun. Qingqiu didn't notice this and was still talking to Suleun. Miss Su, since you have medical skills, can I ask you a favor? Looking at Qingqiu's horrified eyes, Suleun nodded and said, Mrs. Joe, you can tell me what it is first. My medical skills are not good at all, so I may not be able to help you. That's it? Qingqiu looked around for a few times, then suddenly leaned into Suleun's ear. I have been married to my husband for 5 years, but I have never been pregnant. I want to ask Miss Su to help me, but good. Suleun did not expect that what Qingqiu was going to say was this, and his face turned slightly red. Hasn't Mrs. Joe gone to see it? I've seen it, but I've also taken medicine, but it still doesn't work. Qingqiu's expression was a little disappointed. After getting married, what she looked forward to most was to give birth to a child for her husband. Their parents had passed away. If she couldn't even leave a child, the Zhou and Qin families wouldn't the bloodline be cut off with them? Suleun thought of something, frowned and asked, has your husband also seen a doctor? You should know that inability to conceive is sometimes not just a problem for women, men may also have problems. Qingqiu nodded in embarrassment. My husband-in-law is the doctor who went to see the doctor with me. Listening to the conversation between the two, Suye coughed lightly and vaguely guessed the topic. Liangzin and Kuai were reminded by this cough, and their cheeks turned red. Then let me take your pulse. Suleun put a soft pad under Qingqiu's wrist and felt her pulse. After a moment, Suleun withdrew his hand strangely. Mrs. Joe, can I see the medicine you take? Of course, it's in the house, I'll get it. Qingqiu ran into the house and came out soon with several packages of medicine. Suleun opened the medicine packets one by one. The proportions of medicinal materials inside were exactly the same. But the expression on Suleun's face was a little weird. She took out 2 medicinal materials from the medicine bag and placed them in front of Qingqiu. Don't the doctor who wrote the prescription for you know that if these 2 medicinal ingredients are put together, the entire prescription will lose its efficacy? Qingqiu was stunned and said, Miss Su, what you mean is, most of the medicinal materials in this prescription are fine, but the doctor who prescribed it to you probably didn't notice this. Mrs. Joe, you should be a premature infant with cold air in your body, so it is difficult to conceive. If you take this medicine, you will be able to get pregnant easily. It can regulate the coldness in your body, but in this prescription, these 2 medicinal materials will conflict with each other, resulting in a reduction in the efficacy of the medicine. Therefore, after taking it for so long, although it has some cumulative effect, it is still not very interesting. So that's it? Qingqiu suddenly realized after listening to Suleun's explanation. Suleun smiled helplessly. If Mrs. Joe doesn't mind, can you bring me the prescription and I'll change the ingredients on it for you? Ms. Su, wait a moment. Soon, Qingqiu took out the prescription. Suleun took a quick look at it and revised several medicinal ingredients on it with his pen. After finishing writing, Suleun looked at it carefully to make sure there were no problems before giving it to Chinchiu. Don't take the previous medicine anymore. Just take this prescription and get it. Thank you so much, Miss Su. Chinchiu thanked Suleun again and heard footsteps outside the courtyard door. A man in somewhat disheveled clothes walked into the yard, covering his face. Mr. Sir, what's wrong with you? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 65. Chapter 65 Meeting Gu Yuanbei by chance. Chinchiu's eyes widened and she rushed to her husband's side. Zhou Mingsheng looked at the people in the yard, lowered his head and shook his head. I'm fine, madam. Since there are guests, I'll go in first. You think it's okay? You're bleeding. Chinchiu was extremely anxious, and his eyes were full of worry. Madam, I'm really fine. I just accidentally tripped when I came back. I'll just apply some medicine and it'll be fine. Real. Hearing what her husband said, Chinchiu was still a little worried, but she could only help her into the house. After a while, Chinchiu came out and said to Suleun, Miss Su, it's really too sudden. My husband is like this. I'm afraid I won't be able to entertain you today. Miss Su, please tell me where your home is. I'll send you some things in a few days. Mrs. Zhou, there's really no need. Suleun could not evade it, and could only ask Chinchiu to send it to Grandma Hongyi, and someone would naturally send it to her. Just before leaving, Suleun thought for a moment and said hesitantly, Mrs. Zhou, judging from your husband's wound, I'm afraid it would be best to go to the hospital for a checkup. Okay, I'll take my husband to have a look later. Miss Su, thank you very much. Out of the alley, Suye wondered, Sister, the identities of these two people are unknown. I'm afraid they are. Brother, don't worry, I've asked Quilayu to ask. Suleun looked at Quilayu, who took a step forward and said, I have asked several nearby families that the couple did move here half a year ago, and that Mr. Zhou does teach at Kaiming Academy. Kaiming Academy. Suye read it again and seemed to remember something. In this case, I seem to have heard of the reputation of Mr. Zhou. Li Laohanlin mentioned not long ago that there is a gentleman who teaches at Kaiming Academy. He is afraid that he will be ranked first in the spring festival. To be praised like this by Li Laohanlin, Zhou Mingshen's strength must be extraordinary. It's just that Suleun had never heard of this name in his previous life. Suleun suddenly shook her head. She had forgotten that if she was right, Zhou Ming might have died in the Jade Tower long ago. No wonder she felt something was wrong that day. In her previous life, when she went to Jade Building for the first time, Jade Building was not on Chang'an Street. Brother Su. A loud voice came from behind. Suleun was about to turn around and look, when Suye grabbed him and said, Sister, let's go quickly. Brother. Suleun was pulled forward by Suye. But he was soon overtaken by the man. Brother Su, why did you run away when you saw me? Gu Yuanbei put his hand on Suye's shoulder like a good friend, but his eyes fell on Suleun. He looked at the veiled woman and his heart skipped a beat. Brother Su, why don't you come out to meet your lover? Gu Yuanbei, if you talk nonsense like this again, how about we go to the school training ground and try our fists? Suye glanced at Gu Yuanbei and quickly explained to Suleun, this guy is so unobtrusive. Don't worry about it, Yunur. Yunur, Gu Yuanbei suddenly let go of his hand on Suye's shoulder and looked at Suleun, you are brother Su's sister, right? No wonder there is something familiar between your eyebrows. What I just said casually, please Yunur my dear, I'm sorry. With that said, Gu Yuanbei leaned over to bow to Suleun and expressed his apology. Suleun said quickly, this young master doesn't have to be like this, I don't take it to heart. Gu Yuanbei, can you call me Sister Yunur? Brother Su, don't be so stingy, isn't your sister my sister, Sister Yunur, don't you think so? Looking at the scene where Suya and Gu Yuanbei were bickering, the corners of Suleun's mouth curled up under the veil. This scene seemed a bit like a lifetime ago. Gu Yuanbei's father was a bachelor's degree student at the Hanlin Academy. Logically speaking, as a scholar, Gu Yuanbei should not have any contact with Suya, a general. However, Gu Yuanbei was a very interesting person. He did not like to study literature, but preferred to study martial arts. But after so many years of learning, my hands and feet are still the same, with no improvement. Instead, he became familiar with Suya. He was the only man in the Gu family. Several times, Gu Yuanbei was so angry that he picked up a guy and beat him, sending people running all over the yard. His cries could be heard from far away. Suleun was lucky enough to see it once. Although Gu Yuanbei doesn't like studying literature, he has a very good brain. In the palace examination next year, he was selected as the #1 scholar by the emperor. He also married a princess, making him famous for a while. When something happened to his brother in his previous life, he was the only one who stood up to speak for him in court. Suleun's eyes became softer and softer. Brother Gu is right. Yunur, how can you help him speak? Suya looked helpless, and his sister even turned her elbows outward. Gu Yuanbei smiled as if he had succeeded in stealing. If it weren't for the delicate features and beautiful features on his face, it would have been unbearable to look at. Sister Yunur is really on the right track. Let's go. It's better to meet by chance than to invite me. Brother, I'll take you to eat delicious food. So, the group of people stood in front of the Jade Tower again. Suya rolled his eyes. He and Gu Yuanbei came to Feiqi building a few days ago. Gu Yuanbei persuaded him and went back drunk, but he came back today. Oh, Mr. Gu is here, please take a seat. As soon as the shopkeeper saw Gu Yuanbei, he immediately came over to greet him. Obviously, Gu Yuanbei is already a frequent visitor to Feiqi building. The group of people sat down in the box. Gu Yuanbei reported the names of several dishes and asked Suleun, does Sister Yunur have any taboos? Not at all. Suleun shook his head. Gu Yuanbei nodded, that's good. These are Jade House's signature dishes. Sister Yunur will eat more later. In her previous life, Suleun had been to Jade House several times and had eaten Jade House's signature dishes. However, in this life, she could only eat a few bites of pastries during her last visit. In the eyes of others, she had never eaten these dishes, so she smiled. Nod, okay. Speaking of which, when we enter the house, why doesn't Sister Yunur take off her veil? Gu Yuanbei was a little confused. Suya's expression changed. He just remembered this and was about to stop him when he saw Suleun calmly taking off his veil, revealing a face covered in red rash. This. Gu Yuanbei was stunned, but Suya next to him was ready with one hand. Once Gu Yuanbei said something stupid, he would immediately cover his mouth. Sister Yunur looks very good even if she looks like this. Maybe she just returned to Beijing and is not used to the local environment. Don't worry, I have some good cream at my house. I will have someone send it to Sister Yunur when I get back. Then Yunur will thank Brother Gu first. Suleun had known Gu Yuanbei's temperament for a long time, and even though he was acting carelessly, he was actually more careful than anyone else. Suya glanced sideways at Gu Yuanbei, slowly put down his hand, and hummed softly, you know what's going on. Soon, the dishes were served. With Gu Yuanbei here as a talkative person and Suleun always picking up his topics, the two of them had a great time chatting. Suya, on the other hand, wanted to interrupt but didn't know what to say. He could only eat the dishes in a dull manner, glaring at Gu Yuanbei from time to time. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 66. Chapter 66, Sisters Fighting. When the shopkeeper opened the door, Sulayun's eyebrows crumpled with laughter as he listened to Gu Yuanbei talking about interesting things in Jiangnan. This scene fell into Xiao Shenjiao's eyes. Your Highness. Su Ye, who was facing the door, saw Xiao Shenjiao first and quickly stood up to greet him. Why is it such a coincidence? Sulayun's smiling mouth suddenly stiffened, and he turned his head in panic, not daring to look at Xiao Shenjiao. The rash on her face is still exposed at this time. As soon as the shopkeeper saw this scene, he knew that he had made a mistake. He originally thought that Xiao Shenjiao had an appointment with Gu Yuanbei and others, so he led people to this box. Xiao Shenjiao didn't miss the red rash on Sulayun's face. Seeing her resisting like this, he felt a little helpless. Could it be that in Sulayun's eyes, he is the kind of person who only values a woman's appearance? The king has an appointment with you today, so I won't disturb you. Xiao Shenjiao looked at the three of them, turned around, and walked in another direction. When the door was closed, Sulayun had already put on her veil. She thought she wouldn't care about the eyes of others, but the sudden appearance of Xiao Shenjiao made her feel shy for a moment. Brother, it's already late, we should go back. Su Ye wished that Sulayun could stay away from Gu Yuanbei as soon as possible, so he stood up and said goodbye to Gu Yuanbei. Before leaving, I also paid for the meal on the table. Sister, what are you going to do about your face? Su Ye asked, scratching his hair. Sulayun shook his head. Brother, don't worry, I have other plans. Back to the Su mansion, Nanny John came up to us and said worriedly, Miss, the old lady asked you to come over. Grandma, what are you doing with your sister? I'll go with you. Su Ye frowned. Because of the allergy problem, the old lady specially spared Sulayun's greetings, but why did she suddenly let people pass by again? Sulayun had some vague guesses in his mind. Brother, don't you still have something to be busy with? I can just go by myself. Then pay attention to yourself. Although he didn't know what the old lady wanted to do with Sulayun, Su Ye had no hope for Su Mansion since he found out that Su Changqing had an extramarital affair. Especially since he knew very well about his father's filial piety, the old lady didn't know about the extramarital affairs. Love is really impossible. Before entering the yard, Sulayun heard the laughter of Lu Shuiying and Su Weiner coming from inside the house. Coaxed the old lady to smile. As soon as Sulayun entered the room, the old lady's face dropped. The granddaughter pays her respects to her grandmother. Sulayun narrowed his eyes and saluted the old lady. From the corner of his eye, he saw Su Weiner and Lu Shuiying standing together. They were extremely close to each other, completely different from before. Lu Shuiying saw the veil on Sulayun's face and pretended to be puzzled. Why does my sister wear a veil when she meets my grandmother? How ugly is this? With that said, she stepped forward to hold Sulayun in her arms, and went straight to take off the veil from Sulayun's face. Sulayun was on guard for a long time and gently pressed Lu Shuiying's hand. Cousin Shuiying, maybe you don't know. I don't know what I have eaten in the past few days, and I have a rash on my face. I am afraid that you will feel uncomfortable seeing it, so I brought it with me wearing a veil. Lu Shuiying's heart was pounding. She couldn't break free from her suppressed hand. Is Sulayun so strong? Sulayun, let go. The next second, she jerked her hand away. Unexpectedly, Sulayun let go of his hand. She staggered back a few steps and bumped into the table before stopping. Cousin Shuiying, please be careful. Sulayun smiled at Lu Shuiying, who was helped up by the maid, with anger in her eyes. You do this deliberately. There were not many people in the room, but Lu Shuiying still felt that she had been humiliated and could not suppress her anger at all. Sulayun was surprised and said, What did cousin Shuiying say? I just listened to you and let go of my hand. How could it be intentional? You obviously squeezed my hand purpose. Lu Shuiying raised her hand as she spoke, but her expression was stunned. She clearly felt that Suleun's strength was extremely strong, but she didn't leave any mark at all. How come? Cousin Shuiying, maybe you feel wrong. It's like some people who want to do bad things always feel like someone is watching them. Suleun seemed to be trying to smooth things over for Lu Shuiying, but in fact he was hinting that Lu Shuiying had a guilty conscience. Lu Shuiying stared, and was about to say something when she heard the old lady say in a deep voice, "Okay, sisters, please stop making trouble." This sentence actually turns the scene into a joke between sisters. Suleun was not surprised. Besides Suwaner, Lu Shuiying was also the old lady's favorite child. How could the old lady sit idly by when she saw her beloved granddaughter being bullied? "I called you here today because Mrs. Li's birthday party will be held in 5 days as the legitimate daughter of our Su family. If you don't go, it will be a joke," the old lady said and looked at the veil on Suleun's face again. She frowned. "As for your face, it should be healed in 5 days. You don't have to wear a veil anymore and let others see it without knowing what ugly things to say." "Granddaughter?" Suleun frowned slightly, seeming to resist. Suwaner quickly said, "Sister Yunur, Mrs. Li specially asked Brother Li Rui to send a message, saying that she wants to see you and must let you go. If you don't go, won't you disappoint Mrs. Li?" "It sounds nice to say it. I don't know whether it was Mrs. Li's intention or her own." Suleun hid the sarcasm in his eyes. "Yunur was just thinking, since I'm going to celebrate her birthday, I wonder if I can personally prepare a gift for Mrs. Li." In her previous life, she had gone to great lengths to marry into the Li family, but except for Li Lao Hanlin, who treated her kindly because of his friendship with his grandfather, the rest of the Li family all tried to humiliate her. Although Mrs. Li didn't look down on her directly because of her elder's dignity, when she married into the Li family, she moved directly to a villa in the suburbs. In the eyes of outsiders, this scene didn't mean that she, the granddaughter-in-law, was not good enough. Okay. Otherwise, she would not move sooner or later, but she moved the day before she came in. Therefore, on the wedding night, Li Rui sneered at her for doing whatever it took to marry into the Li family. He did not even enter her room and moved directly to the study. And after the incident spread, she was even ridiculed by people all over the capital. On the day he returned home, Li Rui left her behind and went directly to the other village to see Mrs. Li. However, she returned to the Su mansion alone, and was scolded by the old lady, saying that she had no filial piety and actually made Mrs. Li angry away. He also said that she didn't look like a young lady from a marquee house, and she couldn't even control her husband. Suleun bit his lower lip hard before he came out of the feeling of despair. She originally wanted to avoid the birthday banquet, but since both the old lady and Suwaner wanted her to go, why should she escape? She should get back the humiliation she suffered in the Li family in her previous life. "Since you have this intention, just get ready." The old lady nodded, but she didn't take it to heart. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 67. Chapter 67 Sun Gro knows. Seeing this, Suwaner was not willing to let Suleun stand out alone. She couldn't help but said, "Grandma, can Waner do the same as her sister and make some small gifts for Mrs. Li? You are a thoughtful person. Mrs. Li will definitely be happy if she sees you." The old lady's uneasy attitude towards Suwaner and Suleun fell into the eyes of Lu Shuiying and Lu Suya. Lu Shuiying also came forward and said coquettishly, "Grandma, I'll go with Sister Waner, too." "Well." Suwaner and Lu Shuiying surrounded the old lady, making her laugh. Suleun lowered his head and said, "Grandma, that Yunur has to leave first." The old lady responded lightly. Seeing that Suleun was about to leave, Lu Suya also stood up and left with the old lady. The two of them left the yard together. Sister Yunur. When Luswaya called Sulayun, even she didn't know what she was going to do. Sulayun looked at her and saw the troubled look on her face, so he said, if cousin Shweya is fine, why don't you go and play in my yard? It's good that Sister Yunur doesn't dislike it. Kaya Huaziazu. As soon as Luswaya sat down, Lian Xian and Quiliu had already served tea and snacks. She took a sip of tea and was slightly startled, is this Yumo Feng? Exactly, if cousin Shweya likes it, I will ask Lian Xian to send it to you later. Luswaya shook her head, this fine tea is a waste for me. My cousin is talking nonsense. Tea is just for drinking, so what's the waste? What's more, my cousin can taste Yumo Feng in one sip. She must know a lot about tea. They say that when mountains meet flowing water, good tea will be found. My dear cousin, don't shirk it. Then I'll thank Sister Yunur. Luswaya took a deep look at Sulayun. Did a person who could say such words really grow up in a place like Jingzhou? Sulayun smiled and took off the veil. Your face. Luswaya's eyes couldn't help but fall on Sulayun's face, and then there was a hint of suspicion in her eyes. It's a little ugly, I hope I didn't scare my cousin. Sulayun met Luswaya's gaze and smiled apologetically. Luswaya shook her head slowly, but her eyes flashed across Sulayun's face from time to time. She was thinking, why did she seem to have seen this allergy before? So that every time Sulayun spoke to her, Luswaya's reaction was a few beats slower. Cousin, what are you busy with? Sulayun couldn't help but ask after seeing her reaction. Luswaya shook her head at first, but she couldn't even drink the good Yumo Feng. In the end, she stood up and said, Sister Yunur, can I get a closer look at the rash on your face? Without waiting for Sulayun to answer, Luswaya stepped forward so fast that Sulayun didn't even react. Cousin, what's wrong? Sister Yunur, the doctor said you have an allergy, Luswaya frowned. The more she observed, the more certain her eyes became, you are obviously poisoned by the poison of Hunghaka. Honghaji. Sulayun was shocked, but his face was filled with surprise. Hungji is the most important medicinal ingredient in the poison. How did Luswaya see it? She clearly remembered that this cousin had never studied medicine. Luswaya couldn't hide her confusion and looked at Sulayun. Honghagan poison is not uncommon, how come the doctors in the capital can't see it? How did my cousin recognize it? Sulayun did not answer directly, but asked another question. When I was in Suzhou, I saw someone who was poisoned by this kind of poison. The rash on her face was exactly the same as yours. I can't remember it wrong. Poisoned. Suddenly there was a voice outside the door. Sun Gro's gloomy face came into Sulayun's eyes. Mom, why are you here? Sulayun never expected that Sun Gro would come at this moment, so he stood up quickly. Sun Gro stared at Sulayun for a moment, then said to Luswaya, Girl Swaya, my aunt and Yunur have something to say, can you stay away for a while? Aunt, Sister Yunur, Shweya is leaving first. Luswaya nodded and left. After the others left, Sun Gro looked at Sulayun with a cold face and asked in a deep voice, Yunur, you already knew that it was poisoning, right? Mother. Sulayun did not refute. Mother and daughter were connected. She could see that Sun Gro's words were not a test. Why are you so stupid? Sun Gro sighed heavily and pulled Sulayun to sit on the couch. How could she not see that Sulayun told her this simply because he did not want her to worry? I thought I was bringing my daughter back to enjoy the happiness, but I didn't expect that all kinds of things had happened. She is a mother and has her daughter to worry about. Do you know who did this? Stop lying to me. Sun Gro had a guess in her mind. She stared at Sulayun with a look that she could not refuse. Sulayun pursed her lips and said, It's Suwainer. It's really her. Sun Gro twisted the handkerchief in her hand, her tone full of annoyance after learning the truth. Grandma Li and Grandma Zhang looked at each other with surprise and disgust for Su Weiner. Su Weiner is deliberately trying to ruin Miss Yuna's face. Mom, Yuna shouldn't have hidden this from you, don't be angry. Sulayun was worried that Sun Gro would be upset, so he quickly comforted her with a soft voice. Sun Gro stretched out her hand to pull up the hair on Sulayun's cheek, and said helplessly, Mom is not angry with you. What are you going to do about this matter? My daughter is already prepared, but now she just needs a stage. She will make Su Weiner pay the due price. East Street, Baikatang. Qin Xiu entered the hospital with a medicine bag in hand. Doctor, the medicine you prescribed for me was wrong. She put the medicine bag in her hand directly in front of Dr. He, and everyone in the medical center looked over. Dr. He is the most powerful doctor in Baikatang and has treated many noble people. This is the first time someone said that he prescribed the wrong medicine. Madam, have you found the wrong person? Dr. He was not in a hurry and got up and returned. Qin Xiu frowned, of course I didn't find the wrong person. You were the one who treated me that day. There's something wrong with this prescription. What do you call this lady? Dr. He took a look at the style of the medicine bag and found that it was indeed from Baikatang. He looked at Qin Xiu again, but still didn't recognize who the other person was. The medicine boy on the side reminded him. Dr. He, this is Mr. Zhou's wife, she did come to see you before. Mr. Zhou? Is that Mr. Zhou from Kaiming Academy? After receiving the medicine boy's confirmation, Dr. He had a vague impression, it turns out to be Mrs. Zhou. I remember you came to see a doctor before. As he said that, he was a little confused, you just said that I prescribed the wrong medicine. I don't know why. Look at these two medicinal materials, a lady said that if these two medicinal materials are put together, the medicine will have no effect. Qin Xiu took out the medicinal materials that Sulayun pointed out before, and took out a prescription from her arms and placed them in front of Dr. He. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 68. Chapter 68 cannot be put together. Dr. He frowned as soon as he heard Qin Xiu's words. Mrs. Zhou, you said you listened to a young lady? As far as I know, there is no woman with medical skills in any medical clinic in the capital. Ms. Su is indeed not a doctor at the medical clinic. Qin Xiu was a little anxious and wanted to hand the prescription to Dr. He. I heard Dr. He sneer, that's interesting. A doctor who is not a medical clinic said that there is something wrong with my prescription. Mrs. Zhou, is it possible that you are here to cause trouble? That Mr. Zhou is very knowledgeable, why is his wife so confused? Dr. He is one of the most famous doctors in the capital. She actually said there was something wrong with Dr. He's prescription. I don't know which family Ms. Su is from. I am afraid that after reading some medical books, I feel that I can give advice to others. Qin Xiu had never been pointed out like this before, let alone her husband-in-law. In her life, she was most proud of being married to Zhou Mingsheng, but it was also the thing that made her feel inferior. Qin Xiu didn't read many books before marrying Zhou Mingsheng. She learned many things under Zhou Mingsheng's guidance after marrying Zhou Mingsheng. She hesitated for a moment. She also couldn't understand the prescriptions and ingredients. She believed what Sulayun said, but now that she was pointed out like this, she began to doubt it again. Is it possible that Sulayun made a mistake? But the scene at the Jade Building came to mind. Sulayun really saved her husband. This scene was something she would never forget. At that time, she almost killed her husband because she doubted Sulayun. Qin Xiu clenched her fists. Ms. Su said that there was something wrong with the prescription for her own good. How could she still doubt Ms. Su? Qin Xiu suppressed the guilt in her heart and looked at Dr. He. Dr. He, you said Miss Su was wrong without even looking at the prescription. Isn't it too arbitrary? Looking at Qin Xiu's unwillingness, Dr. He's eyes flashed with boredom. Since Mrs. Joe insists on letting me take a look, I will take a look. Doctor, he reached out and took the prescription from Chinchiu's hand. The prescription had been modified by Suleun. The most taboo thing for medical practitioners is for others to change their prescriptions at will. Doctor, he frowned immediately. Mrs. Joe, why do you want to show my prescription to others? Ms. looked at the medicinal materials and said there was something wrong with it, so she changed the prescription for me. Chinchiu explained. Doctor, he sneered, Mrs. Joe, do you know that a doctor cannot show prescriptions to others at will? What's more, the Missu you are talking about is a woman who has not even read a few books on medical skills. If you dare to make random changes to other people's prescriptions, if something goes wrong, will you blame me for it? No, no, Doctor, I didn't mean that. Mrs. Joe, I know that you want to be pregnant with your husband's child, but you are too anxious to eat hot tofu. Don't believe whatever random people say. Suddenly Doctor, he told her this, Chinchiu felt that the eyes of everyone around her were on her belly. Her face turned red with embarrassment. There are 3 types of unfilial piety, the greatest of which is not having offspring. How could she not be worried? She has been married to her husband for 5 years, but she has never been pregnant with a child. This matter is like a thorn stuck in her mouth, and she cannot speak or swallow it. She even thought that if it really couldn't be cured, she wouldn't hurt her husband by asking him to divorce her and remarry her. It turns out he doesn't lay eggs, no wonder he's so anxious. That Missu is really hateful. She knows other people's urgent matters and deliberately says such things. Is she trying to deliberately slander Doctor He? Not like this. The more Chinchiu wanted to explain, the more panicked she became and didn't know where to start. She didn't even care about the fact that she couldn't get pregnant when Dr. He pointed it out, and she wanted to defend Suleun. She has no enmity with Miss Su, so why would Miss Su lie to her? What's more, she was the first to ask Miss Su for help in this matter. Dr. He's eyes passed over Suleun's handwriting, and he suddenly took a picture of the prescription. I'm afraid this lady is joking. She actually put Guangui and Shiji together. Anyone who has read medical books knows that the two should never be put together. Some people around him who knew a little bit nodded, indeed. But Mrs. Joe, you don't have to explain to Miss Su anymore. I did not prescribe the wrong medicine. If you don't believe me, you can find another doctor to see it. There is no need to deliberately embarrass me like this. Seeing the people around her criticizing her, Chinchiu lowered his head in embarrassment. She didn't understand medicine, so she couldn't even say a word when faced with such a scene. There is even no way to explain it to Suleun. Perhaps Miss Su didn't look carefully. What's so noisy? An old voice came from the door of Baikatang. The crowd separated into a lane, and an old man with a grey beard walked in with the help of a servant. Mr. Zhang, why are you here? As soon as Dr. He saw the visitor, he immediately greeted him with a particularly flattering expression. Mr. Zhang glanced at him and said, if I hadn't come, I don't know when our Baiko Hall would have turned into a market. What are you doing so noisily? Mr. Zhang, there's nothing wrong. Please wait a moment. I'll resolve the matter immediately. Doctor He picked up the prescription on the table and was about to throw it to Chinchiu. Mrs. Joe, please listen to my advice. How can you believe that someone who has never even read a few medical books can trust her to prescribe something good, the prescription? She can even write it down for Guangui and Shiji. Isn't this intentional to harm you? But Miss Su saved my husband that day. Chinchiu gritted her teeth. Everyone in Jade Tower saw it at that time. Miss Su must be good at medicine. I know about this, someone said from the side. I was also at the Jade building that day, and a girl did save someone. Doctor He sighed, Mrs. Joe, maybe that person accidentally hit you. In short, I promise that as long as you follow my prescription, you will definitely be fine. No, Miss Su could tell that I was a premature baby when she checked my pulse for the first time. How could she not understand medical skills? Dr. He, I remember that when you first examined me, you didn't tell me at all. I will tell you this later. Qin Qiu seemed to be grasping at a life-saving straw, staring at Dr. He closely. These words surprised Dr. He. When he examined Qin Qiu for the first time, he did not realize that Qin Qiu was born prematurely. Oh, it sounds like this Miss Su's medical skills are indeed superb. Xiao He, please show me the prescription. Lao Zhang touched his white beard with a bit of surprise in his eyes. If Qin Qiu didn't lie, Miss Su could tell the condition of Qin Qiu's premature baby the first time she felt her pulse, and her medical skills should be good. Dr. He hesitated for a moment and handed the prescription in his hand to Mr. Zhang. Mr. Zhang, even if she is good at taking pulses, this prescription is clearly interesting, really interesting. The expression on Mr. Zhang's face suddenly changed, as if he had found a treasure, and he even stood up involuntarily. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 69. Chapter 69 Doubt. Although this lady is bold in using medicine, she is extremely careful at first glance. Guangui and Shizi should not go together, but she neutralized it with Poria and Attractalodes. This prescription is so good. How come? Doctor He looked at Mr. Zhang in surprise. He never expected that Mr. Zhang would react like this. Qin Qiu was overjoyed. Mr. Zhang, do you mean that Miss Su's prescription is correct? Not only is it right, it's also excellent. Mr. Zhang looked at Qin Qiu. I wonder who this Miss Su is. Ms. Su did not tell her name. Qin Qiu shook her head and then realized that Sulayun was wary of her. Mr. Zhang, did you read that correctly? Doctor He couldn't believe it and couldn't help but ask again. Mr. Zhang glanced at him and said, I didn't say that treating diseases and prescribing medicines is never based on a single point of view, but from an overall perspective. You can copy this prescription and give it to me. Seriously, watch it a few times. No one present expected that things would take such a turn, but Mr. Zhang was a doctor who even wanted to treat Dr. He well. Dr. He didn't dare to refute, and naturally they wouldn't either. Instead, he began to accuse Dr. He. There are people outside the world, and there are people outside the world. Dr. He really needs to study hard. Isn't that right? That Miss Su must have some skills. I just said that maybe Miss Su is really good. Listening to everyone's praise of Sulayun, Qin Qiu's mood didn't change much. If Mr. Zhang hadn't been there, she would have caused Miss Su to be slandered by everyone today. Dr. He copied the prescription under the watchful eye of Mr. Zhang, and handed the prescription back to Qin Qiu with both hands. Mrs. Zhou, I misunderstood you and Miss Su because of my poor medical skills. I am here to apologize to you and Miss Su. Dr. He blushed. Since he became famous, he is really a little proud. Today's incident gave him a blow to the head, but it actually made him calm down. Qin Qiu saw Dr. He saluting herself, and quickly waved her hand. Dr. He, you are too polite. I make the decision today. If this lady comes to Baikatang to get medicine in the future, the medicine fee will be waived. Lao Zhang's words received support from everyone. A medicine boy had already prepared medicine for Qin Qiu, and soon the medicine was packed. Qin Qiu took the medicinal materials and left the money she should give. Although Mr. Zhang had good intentions, this good intention should belong to Miss Su, not her. Mr. Zhang, Dr. He, I should pay for the medicine. As for the apology, I will accept it for Miss Su for the time being. I will convey it to you if I have the chance, so I won't bother you. After she finished speaking, she turned around and left with the medicine bag. Mr. Zhang stroked his beard and sighed, No wonder Mrs. Joe can marry Zhou Mingsheng. I'm afraid some men can't match her integrity. Seeing that the excitement was gone, the people around him dispersed, leaving only a few patients attending the clinic. When Qin Qiu returned home, Zhou Mingsheng happened to come out of the house, and the wound on his face had been bandaged. "Madam, you are back." Zhou Mingsheng stepped forward to help Qin Qiu carry the medicine bag, but Qin Qiu avoided him. "I can do it myself. You can go back to the house and lie down." "Madam, I'm fine. It's just that my face was injured, and my hands and feet are not broken." Zhou Mingsheng repeatedly stated that Qin Zhuokai smiled and let him take the medicine bag away, while she turned and entered the kitchen. "While making a fire, prepare the ingredients you need." Zhou Mingsheng put down the medicine bag and came to the kitchen. He rolled up his sleeves and started to help Qin Qiu work. The two of them work well together and have obviously done a lot of work together. "Ms. Sir, you are injured and cannot go to the academy to teach. Who will take the classes these days?" Zhou Mingsheng's hand movements paused, but Qin Qiu did not see it. "I am not the only wife in the academy, madam, you don't have to worry." "Will the monthly payment be deducted?" Qin Qiu wiped her hands and was about to take a handkerchief to wipe away the sweat. Zhou Mingsheng held the handkerchief and stretched out his hand to wipe the sweat from her forehead. "Although it is winter, there is smoke and heat floating in the kitchen, so it is inevitable that I will sweat a little. I asked the dean and he won't deduct a lot." When Zhou Mingsheng said this, his eyes drooped a little, and he did not dare to look at Qin Qiu. "That's good, but it's okay. I can make up for it if I do more work these days." Qin Qiu smiled, and the couple continued to work. But Zhou Mingsheng was full of guilt. He did not dare to tell Qin Qiu that he had been dismissed from the academy. Peony Garden. Su Weiner frowned and looked at Shui Huan. "You said Hong Yi's family is missing." "Miss, someone from the other village sent a letter, saying that he had gone there early in the morning and that he had disappeared." Shui Huan knelt on the ground, her head hung very low, not daring to look directly at Su Weiner. Su Weiner's thoughts were spinning rapidly and she suddenly said, "That day Hong Yi said that she accidentally touched poison. Is it true?" She always felt a little uneasy. This incident happened so timely that she couldn't help but think about it. Shui Huan shook his head. "Miss, I looked at Hong Ye's hand that day and there was no rash yet." "No," Su Weiner slapped the table, "there must be something wrong with her. Go and bring her to me, no matter what method you use." "Yes." Shui Huan did not dare to hesitate and quickly stood up and left the yard. She walked towards Keahuaziazu in a hurry. There was a knock on Hong Ye's door, and her heart skipped a beat. She quickly glanced at Lian Xian beside her. Lian Xian nodded to her and stood up to open the door. "Miss Sui Huan, what are you doing here?" Lian Xian looked at Shui Huan and showed a surprised expression. Shui Huan's expression froze, but when she saw that there were only red leaves and lotus hearts in the house, she couldn't help but feel suspicious. Could it be that Hong Yi really betrayed the eldest lady? "It's like this. I went out to buy things for the eldest lady this morning, and I happened to meet Hong Ye's family. They asked me to bring something to Lian Xian. I forgot about it for a moment. I only remembered it when I was passing by and wanted to come find it. Hong Yi, ask her to get it from me. So that's it, then I won't bother you when Hong Yi comes back. I'll ask you to teach me how to style my hair." Lian Xian nodded to Shui Huan and left. Hong Ye's face turned pale and she stood up and walked to Shui Huan's side. "Sister Shui Huan. The eldest lady wants to see you." Shui Huan's voice was cold, making Hong Yi tremble involuntarily. Being taken to the peony garden, Hong Yi immediately knelt down when he saw Su Weiner. "My slave, please give my regards to the eldest lady." As soon as he finished speaking, a teacup was thrown at him. Hong Yi didn't dare to hide and took it forcefully. A bag was smashed out of his forehead. "I don't know, what did you do to anger the eldest lady?" Hong Ye's tone was trembling, and she didn't dare to look directly at Suwaner. Suwaner felt a little nervous when she saw Hong Ye's reaction. Judging from Hong Ye's appearance, she didn't seem to know that her family had been rescued. Hong Ye, don't you know what you did? I really don't know this, my eldest lady, please tell me clearly. Hong Ye, you said before that your hands were touched by poisonous powder. I want to see if it's true. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 70. Chapter 70, Suwaner snorted coldly, and Xuehuan immediately stepped forward and raised Hong Ye's hand. The red rash on it is exposed. Is there really one? Suwaner frowned, and Xuehuan rubbed it a few times to make sure it was true. Didn't I give you the antidote before, why haven't you recovered yet? Suwaner stretched her body, leaned back slowly on the chair, and her voice became a little softer. But it seems a bit permeable. Hong Yi didn't dare to move, and kept his head hanging. This slave doesn't know either. Suwaner suddenly smiled and nodded towards Xuehuan. Why are you so nervous? Xuehuan, help him up. With Xuehuan's help, Hong Yi stood up tremblingly, but his head was still hanging tightly, only the scar on his forehead was vaguely exposed. Speaking of which, you haven't seen them in some days. How about I make arrangements for you? While saying this, Suwaner stared at Hong Yi closely, full of temptation. Really? Hong Yi raised his eyes full of excitement. Miss, can you really let the slave see them? As long as you do the next thing well, I will naturally reunite your family. Suwaner's eyes flickered, but she didn't see anything wrong with Hong Yi. The suspicion in her heart faded a bit. I can let you see your family. I'm willing to do anything. Please give me your orders. Hong Yi took a deep breath, not daring to relax at all. Suwaner nodded with satisfaction when she saw Hong Yi like this. Back at Kaehwaziazu, Hong Yi kept walking towards Suleun's house. I'm not surprised that she has this idea. Suleun chuckled after listening to Hong Yi's report. Hong Yi took a breath and continued, Miss, what should I do? Since she asks so, just do it, don't worry. Suleun was not too nervous, and still stared at the embroidery in his hand. Seeing this, Hong Ye was puzzled, but did not ask any more questions. She just had to do it. 2 days have passed, and the rash on Suleun's face has not gone away. Even the people in Kaehwaziazu started to panic. Just because the second lady's temper has become worse and worse in the past few days. When the old lady heard about this, she couldn't help but shake her head and said, this girl Yun is really restless. The old lady is right. Mother Zhao responded and arrived. As he was talking, he heard a voice coming from outside. The second lady fainted. Passed out. When the old lady heard this, she frowned tightly. With the help of Granny Zhao, she stood up on crutches and walked out. When we arrived at Kaehwaziazu, the situation inside was very busy. Old lady, why are you here? Aunt Zhang saw the old lady's figure and hurriedly came to greet her. The old lady glanced at her and said in a deep voice, what happened? Why did someone faint when they were fine? Old madam, you don't know. Granny Zhang looked embarrassed. The rash on Miss Zhang's face has not only not gone away in the past 2 days, but has even become worse. More serious. The old lady narrowed her eyes slightly, hiding some considerations. Sun Gro also arrived with a middle-aged man. Wu Yi, why are you here? The old lady was a little surprised when she saw the middle-aged man following Sun Gro. Sun Shi even invited the imperial doctor. Yi Wu met the old lady and went into the house without exchanging more pleasantries. The old lady glanced at Aunt Zhao, who immediately supported her and entered the house together. In the house, Suleun was lying on the couch with a veil on his face. Physician Wu looked at Suleun's eyes, and then took Suleun's hand to feel his pulse. His face became darker and darker. Yi Wu, What's wrong with my daughter? Sun Gro asked with red eyes. Miss Su is poisoned. Poisoned. Sun Gro screamed, and even the old lady felt her heartbeat slow down. Mr. Wu, what's the matter with the poisoning? The old lady walked up to Dr. Wu and asked puzzledly. Physician Wu thought for a moment and said, back to MRS Su, MRS Su, has second Miss Su taken any medicine recently? Yes, Yuner has been taking medicine today because of allergies. Sun Gro quickly answered. Physician Wu frowned, allergy? But I just checked the pulse and found that Miss Su has a pulse of allergy. How could it be? The doctor at home came to see her and said that our young lady had allergies, which caused problems on her face. Lian Xin hurriedly explained. Upon hearing this, Dr. Wu stretched out his hand to lift the veil from Suleun's face, and his expression suddenly changed. Nonsense, this is obviously poisoned by red Heiji. How could it be an allergy? What? Someone poisoned Sister Yuner. Su Weiner quickly rushed over from the peony garden when she learned that Suleun had fainted. As soon as he entered the door, he heard what Imperial Dr. Wu said. He was very flustered, but he still pretended to be worried on his face. Mother Zhao, go and invite Dr. Zhang here. The old lady knows that Dr. Wu is here, so I'm afraid she won't be able to suppress this matter. Dr. Zhang has been in the government for many years, and his medical skills are not inferior to those of imperial doctors, but they are not inferior. How could he not be able to distinguish between poisoning and allergies? Wu Yi, will my daughter be okay? Madam, there is no need to worry. Second Miss Su is also very lucky. Maybe the medicine she drank in the past few days has stimulated the toxicity, so she fainted, and the problem was discovered in time. I will give second Miss Su a few injections, and she will wake up soon. Please ask Dr. Wu. Soon, Dr. Zhang was brought over. His expression was relaxed, as if he didn't know what was going on. Greetings to the old lady. Dr. Zhang, why is it that girl Yun is poisoned, but you say she is allergic? How can it be? Dr. Zhang was startled. When I took her pulse, it turned out that the second lady was indeed allergic. Dr. Zhang, Dr. Wu said that Sister Yuner was poisoned. Su Waner opened her mouth and returned. Her eyes met with Dr. Zhang's for a moment, but they soon looked away again. Dr. Zhang said righteously, Old madam, I have been in Su Mansion for many years. Even if you don't believe in my character, you should believe in my medical skills, right? The old lady looked a little embarrassed, but Dr. Wu said so. Old madam, please let me see the second young lady. The person is inside, go in. Dr. Zhang walked around the screen and saw Imperial Dr. Wu administering acupuncture to Suleun. He walked to the side and lowered his eyes to look at Suleun's face. Have an idea in mind. After Dr. Wu administered the acupuncture, Suleun was still awake, but his expression had relaxed. Dr. Zhang and Dr. Wu came out from behind the screen together, and the former walked a few steps quickly to the old lady. Old madam, I took the second lady's pulse earlier, and she did have an allergic reaction. Dr. Zhang looked at Dr. Wu. I think Dr. Wu also knows that some poisons look very similar to allergies. Physician Wu did not refute, but nodded. Dr. Zhang is right, but now it seems that Miss Su is indeed poisoned, not allergic. End of this chapter.